who marched against Greece. He was born into power, not as a prince of uncertainty, but as the heir to one of the greatest empires the world had ever seen, Persia. An empire that stretched across continents,
Xerxes,
from deserts to mountains, from cities of gold to armies without end. And at the center of it all, a title. Not just king, but king of kings. And Xerxes was destined to carry it. But power inherited is not the same as power earned, and expectations can be heavier than any crown. He was the son of Darius, a ruler who had already attempted to conquer Greece and failed. That failure did not disappear. It became something else, a wound, a reminder, and for Xerxes, a mission. Because empires do not forget humiliation, they respond to it. And Xerxes would not just rule the Persian Empire,
we fortify the
he would
borders,
restore
deploy the forces,
its dominance,
secure the trade routes.
its image,
My son, the
its
empire's
power.
weight now rests on you.
But before he
I
could
accept
conquer
this sacred
others,
duty, Father.
he had to prove himself worthy of the empire he inherited. And that meant becoming more than a ruler. He had to become a force. Preparing for war was not like preparing anywhere else. This was not a small army, not a regional conflict.
Soldiers of
This
Persia,
was something larger, something designed to overwhelm. Xerxes did not gather
Steady
thousands.
on the left. Watch the
He
alignment.
gathered
Copy. Lead it
hundreds
secure.
of thousands.
Arms
Infantry,
ready, brothers.
cavalry, archers,
Formational strong.
engineers. An army
Generals,
so
the time has
vast
come.
that when
Mobilize
it
your
moved,
forces at once.
it
We mount
changed
over
the
clay
land
wires.
itself. Bridges were built across seas, mountains were crossed, supplies stretched across
King of
entire
Kings demands
regions.
your submission.
Because this
We
was
bow to
not
no foreign
just
king.
a war,
Defiance destruction.
was a
Surrender.
statement.
Or face the might of Persia.
demonstration
down. Then
of
we will
absolute
fight.
power.
A grave decision lies before.
and when Xerxes began his march toward Greece, the world noticed. City-states watched in fear. Some surrendered immediately. Others hesitated. Because the reality was simple. Resistance meant destruction. But Greece was not unified. It was divided,
The numbers are nothing
independent,
against our steel.
proud, and that made it unpredictable. Some chose to submit. Others chose to stand. Among them, Sparta and Athens. Different in philosophy, different in strategy, but aligned in one thing.
The river divides their
They
forces,
would
but
not
crossing it
kneel.
is our challenge. We will
And
flank them from
Xerxes
the eastern ridge.
Would make them. Because to him,
Steal your
this
hearts,
was
the enemy
not just
approaches.
conquest. It was correction, a restoration of order, a lesson to the world that no one defies Persia and survives. The first real test came at a place few expected to matter. A
Your
narrow
defiance is
pass
futile, devil.
between
I
mountains and sea.
These Spartans fight like men
Thermopylae.
possessed. What drives such
It was
defying
not
against an
impressive,
empire?
not grand, not worthy of an empire's attention, but it
together, hold the line!
was strategic. And strategy changes everything. Because no matter how large an army is, if it cannot move freely, it loses its advantage. And that is exactly what Xerxes encountered. A small force, insignificant in number,
Why do they fall? Press
standing
the attack!
in defiance, led
Copy
by
out!
Leonidas I.
Ambush!
At
We're
first,
surrounded!
it seemed
From where? I
almost
see nothing!
insulting.
There! Hold
An
formation!
empire
Push through!
faced by a
Push
handful
forward.
of
Hold the
warriors.
line! Pull
Xerxes
back, they're breaking
expected
through.
submission, fear, retreat. But none came. Instead, they stood, calm, disciplined, unmoving. And when the battle began, something unexpected happened. The Persian army advanced, confident, overwhelming. But the terrain changed everything. The Spartans held the line, wave after wave. The Persian forces attacked, and wave after wave, they were pushed back. Because discipline beats chaos.
Resistance, still they defy
Because
the empire's
preparation
might? Their
beats
defiance will
numbers.
bring them.
Because
I will
those
crush them, but
warriors
deny him.
were not ordinary men. For Xerxes, This was not just resistance.
Stay close.
It was
Let's hide more than
humiliation.
shadows. Lead on.
His
No
army,
treachery.
his
The path now
power,
is ahead.
being held
My
back
king,
by
a
so
secret route
few.
through the mountains. This changes
Days
everything.
passed,
We shift our
and
forces
the
at once.
line did not break. Until it did. Not by force, but by
The enemy
betrayal.
encircles us!
A hidden
We are
path
surrounded, Commander,
revealed, a
and we
way
make our stand.
around the defense. And suddenly, the advantage returned. The trap closed. The
They
Spartans
falter.
were surrounded, and Xerxes finally had what he came for. Victory. But not without cost. Because something had changed.
Thermopylae falls under
Something
Persian
he could
control.
not control.
A victory that reshapes
The
history.
story. Thermopylae fell. The path into Greece was open. And Xerxes advanced. City after city.
This city
fell.
is ours. Let all
Some
bow to
abandoned,
Persia.
others destroyed.
We must
Athens
flee!
burned, reduced to ashes. A symbol, a message. This is what happens to those who resist. At its peak, Xerxes had everything. Victory, power, momentum. But empires do not fall in a single moment. They shift, gradually. And sometimes, the greatest strength becomes a weakness. Because the larger the force, the harder it is to control.
Forces are regrouping.
And
We must
Greece
strike at dawn.
was
Agreed.
adapting,
Feint with the left,
learning,
then prayer the trident.
waiting. The next battle would not be fought on land, but at sea. Salamis,
My
where
fleet is
numbers
vast
meant
and
less,
powerful.
where maneuver
No
mattered
force can
more.
stand against it.
And for the first time, Xerxes was not in control of the battlefield. The Greek forces lured the Persian navy into narrow waters, limited movement, restricted formation, chaos. And
Watch
suddenly,
the sides! We're
the
too close!
advantage shifted. Ships collided, commands failed, coordination broke, and what once seemed
No!
unstoppable
Regain
began
control
to
at the ends!
collapse. Xerxes watched as control slipped, as victory turned uncertain, as the empire he led faced something it had not faced before. Defeat. Xerxes did not fall in battle. He did not lose his empire. But something changed. Because power is not just about what you hold. It is about what others believe. And Greece did not break. It resisted. It adapted. It survived. And that
Empire
mattered.
endured the airfield.
Because for the first
New
time,
edicts have changed
the
everything.
idea that Persia was unstoppable was questioned.
Greek
Xerxes
cities
returned
scarred
to his
by war
empire,
begin
still
their journey
powerful,
of
still
recovery,
ruling, still
restoring
a king
their
of
heritage
kings.
and
Xerxes left a
But no
legacy
longer
carved in
unquestioned,
stone, but his ambition
no
led to
longer
downfall,
inevitable.
reminding us that power is fleeting.
History would remember him, not just as a conqueror, but as the man who came close and failed to finish it. Because
What
even
now?
the greatest empires have limits. Even the most powerful rulers can be challenged. And even the largest armies can be stopped. Not always by
The
strength,
echoes of war are everywhere.
but by strategy,
Every step
by
shapes our
unity,
future.
by defiance, and by those willing to stand, even when the outcome seems certain. Because history is not shaped only by victories. It is shaped by resistance, by moments that shift perception, by stories that refuse to disappear. And Xerxes,
the king of
became
kings,
one
whose
of
might and
those
vision are
stories.
forever etched in the stone
a
of history.
ruler of immense power, a symbol of ambition, a reminder that control